brief, for Mike's sakes. I think Michael filled you in a little bit on what we're doing here, but we're learning biblical Hebrew. Now, the difference between biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew, these letters are modern Hebrew, but we'll be. It's just easier to show them. But we're also going to be looking at the original biblical letters as well, the pictographs and all that's involved. But the idea is each one of these letters speaks specifically about Jesus. Now, the Jews don't recognize Jesus, but they do recognize their Messiah. And so to them, these speak of their Messiah. To us, it speaks of our Messiah, Jesus Christ. Okay, I'll explain more as we go along. There's a paper going around. You're getting the first handout early because I've got a lot of stuff on there. This might be helpful to you, Mike. Can you take pictures on your phone? Okay, you might want to do that because these will be memorable to you later on. You'll see at the top of this page the modern Hebrew letter, Aleph, and next to it you'll see the Aleph with a crown on it. Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet, and it is the king of all the letters. Below that, you'll see, again, a picture of the Aleph with the three letters that make up the Aleph. In other words, the three letters that make up the word Aleph. Okay, because Aleph is a letter and it is a word. And they are the two yods, which we'll talk about later, and the vav. And they equal, each one of them has a numerical value that equals 26, which is the same as that thing's always in my way. There, in the very top left-hand corner there, you will see in red the Yod He Vav He, which is the holy name of God that the Jews are considered too holy to speak. But those letters add up to 26, and the Yod, the three letters of the Aleph add up to 26. So it's just another confirmation that Aleph stands for God. Aleph is God, the holy name of God. Two Yods plus one Vav equal the Aleph. The total numerical value of the parts of the Aleph, the number of God's holy name, is 26. Okay, we get into a lot of numbers in this class, and that's the reason why we're doing all this morning, so that Steve can have those to pass out. Okay, so the Aleph, you also see a little diagram here that shows the Aleph, and it has four components, four parts of the Aleph, and they are the face, which is the upper Yod, the leg, which is the leg, if you would, of the lower Yod, the foot is the foot of the Vav, and the kotes is the tip of the lower Yod. And you'll see that on the diagram. I think it's very self-explanatory. Okay, now we're ready to begin the lesson. Aleph is one, but it's made up of four parts. One is symbolic of God. God is one. God is the only one. Oneness is in every aspect. He is three in one, but he is one. So God is one. The four parts equal the creation of the world, or the creative works of God. Interestingly enough, that this letter, the components of this letter, tell you about the creation of the world. Because the first thing that God did in the beginning was to create the world through his creative works. And what are those creative works? These letters that you see up here are his creative works. Okay, again, the upper yod represents God. The lower yod represents man. Stay here a second, Patty.
Yes, sure.
I'll let you start this one around the other direction.
Yay, you get to be first.
It worked out real good. The upper yod represents God. The lower yod represents man. And this handout that's going around now will give you a diagram to show that. Aleph is a picture of the God-man as one who is composed of both the upper realm of heaven and the lower realm of the earth, connected by the humility of the body. Aleph is a picture of the God-man unity that is Yeshua HaMashiach, or Jesus the Christ. Now, in this class, Mike, I think Michael explained, we're not going to teach you how to speak Hebrew, but we are going to teach you a lot of Hebrew words because they're very helpful in understanding the concept that these letters will give you. So Yeshua HaMashiach, you're going to hear a lot in this class because that is Jesus the Christ. That's the Jewish name for Jesus. Philippians 2, verse 6 through 11. This helps to explain who Jesus actually was as the God-man. Philippians 2, verse 6. Who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. This is a concept that we have a hard time with because Jesus was fully God, and yet he was fully man. So he was in the form of God, and yet he was a man, but it was not an offense to God for him to be equal with God. God made him as his son. Verse 7, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Verse 9, wherefore God also hath highly exalted him, and given him a name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of things in heaven, and things in earth, and things under the earth. Everything that was created was made by Jesus, and everything will bow to Jesus in the last days. Verse 11, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Let me do a little housekeeping here real quick. Oh, well, I'll figure that later. Aleph is a picture of Messiah's intervention. From a messianic point of view, Aleph represents Yeshua, the Mashiach, as our intercessor, and Kohen Gadol, which is Jewish for high priest. No, not ready yet. The two yods represent the outstretched arms or hands reaching both to God and to man. So the yod is reaching out to both. The diagonal vav represents the sacrifice of Yeshua on our behalf. And since Yeshua is the Aleph and the Tav, the letter represents his divinity, his humility and silence, as he opened not his mouth when he was unjustly accused. And that's found in Isaiah 53:7. Isaiah 53 is one of the greatest chapters in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible. How the Jews could read this scripture for centuries and not see what it's saying, I don't know. But they have found one of the original texts of Isaiah 53. And when you go to Israel and you go to the shrine of the book, or the dome of the book, they have a big round display where that scroll is laid out and you can actually read. Oh, thank you. I forgot about that. I would have gotten in trouble for that.
Oh, sorry. Drop the ball.
Okay, so Isaiah
But it's
53
all
said
in Hebrew, right?
it's all in Hebrew.
You can
Yeah,
see it,
it's all.
see how-
I think
how
it.
they-
I think it might have an English
It's,
version as well. I can't remember.
I think there's translations underneath it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking,
It's
underneath it.
behind, like, bulletproof.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You
Both
can't.
sides of the book is
But
circular,
is it the
so
scroll, the actual scroll?
It's the actual
and
scroll.
everything?
Yeah.
It's actually not the real scroll. It's an extremely well done facsimile.
Oh really?
Okay,
Israel
so it's-
Antiquities has the
Okay,
real
you just
scroll locked up.
crushed one of
Okay,
mine.
that's okay, but it's a
I thought the
replica.
same thing though, because they told us while we were there. it
Yeah.
was the real scroll.
Yeah, they did.
But I found out later.
Okay.
Either way, it's really cool. So-
Isaiah 53 verse 7. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. He uttered no sound, no word of complaint, because he knew what he was doing. In other words, he didn't, when they were accusing him of things that he knew he didn't do, he knew why he was being accused. He knew that he came for this purpose, to die on the cross for our sins. The Aleph is also eschatological. Would I say that wrong? Yeah, eschatological, yeah. Eschatology is the study of end times events. And it's a fascinating study. If you've never experienced it, you ought to do some research on that. Yeshua said he is the Aleph and the Tav, which is the first and the last, the beginning and the end. The letter Aleph has overtones of the end of days spoken of in prophecy. The idea that there are 6,000 years of the Olam Hazeh, which is this present age, before the arrival of the Messiah to set up his kingdom, comes from the fact that there are 6 Alephs in the first verse of the Tanakh, which is the Hebrew Bible, and each one represents 1,000 years. Now, I think I've given you this before, but this is important to understand, that the eschatological aspect of the letter Aleph comes from the fact that there is a belief that the young earth theory, which we're not going to discuss this morning, but the theory is that there are 6 days of creation. Each day is 1,000 years, so 6,000 years. But anyway, then the Messiah would come, set up his kingdom, and rule and reign from Jerusalem. And this comes from the fact that there are 6 Alephs. If you look it up in Hebrew, you can count the 6 Alephs in the first verse of Genesis, and each one represents 1,000 years. Now this has credence because Aleph has a numerical value of 1, but also of 1,000. It can be either one. It can be used as 1 or 1,000.
That's good.
Why am I having so much difficulty with this? Okay, handout number 3. I have a volunteer from the
I'll
audience.
be the pepper boy.
All right, thank you.
You do a good job of it too.
Well, Josh is usually our favorite.
Yeah, we normally let the youngest do, because he's got stronger legs than the rest of us do.
Not
Okay,
having you stronger, it makes you maybe have more energy.
well, that too. Aleph's pictograph is a picture of Yeshua. The pictograph for the Aleph is the ox or the bull representing strength. And it is, I think it's on your next printout. Or maybe, no, it's on there. I see it. That's a picture. This was the original pictograph of the letter Aleph. It represented an oxen because the ox is strong. It represents strength and the leader of the family of God. Jesus is pictured in the book of Mark as the suffering servant, as an ox, one of the four creatures around the throne of God. And I'm going to read you a few chapters from Ezekiel to explain that. Ezekiel 1, verses 5 and 6. Also, out of the midst thereof came the likeness of four living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Every one had four faces, and every one had four wings. And then in Ezekiel 1:10, as for the likeness of their faces, all four of them had the face of a man, the face of a lion on the right side, and they all four had the face of an ox on the left side. They all four also had the face of an eagle. So it's a lion, an ox, or a bull, an eagle. What am I missing?
Lion and something on the left, on the right.
Lion. Huh, I just read that. Lion, ox,
Lion and
man. That's
Yeah,
it. That's it. Thank you, man. Each of the four Gospels, now this is really rather interesting if you've never seen this before, but each of the four Gospels represents Yeshua HaMashiach, or Jesus the Christ, as one of the four creatures around the throne of God. Now, if you envision, people will ask all the time, why are there four Gospels? Why not just one? Or maybe two? Why four? Well, the four is very significant because each of the Gospels written, two of them are actual disciples of Jesus that followed him and lived with him and knew him personally. The other two are disciples, if you will, of someone else. Mark was a disciple of Peter. Luke was a disciple of Paul. But here's the point. Each one of them treats the gospel in a different light. For example, Matthew presents Jesus as the lion, the king of the tribe of Judah, the Lion of Judah. Mark represents the ox, the suffering servant. Luke represents him as the man, the humanity of Jesus, because Jesus was fully man and fully God. John represents the eagle, the divinity of Christ. So each of them, morning guys, glad you could make it. Each of these Gospels present Jesus in a different light. And that's the reason why there are four. Because Jesus fulfills the living creatures that are around the throne of God. He represents each one of them. Okay, Jesus is the picture of the Aleph in human form. This is where we get our word alphabet. It comes from the Hebrew Aleph, Bet. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Bet is the second letter. It's like in English, we call our alphabet the ABCs. Well, this is the Aleph, Bet, okay? Hebrew is the only language in the world that was both pictographic and alphabetic in nature. Pictograph is a pictorial sign or symbol. Pictograph. You can break it down. And the purpose of the pictograph in the early days, there was no written language at that time. The letters, when God spoke the world into existence, he spoke these letters. But they weren't written on the tablets yet. They were just spoken letters. So when the people would hear the word that God gave to Moses, for example, they didn't have a written script to put it down, so they put it down symbols, pictures. And these pictures would represent those letters. And I'm going to show you that on the next handout. Okay, first of all, a pictograph is a picture representing a word, phrase, or idea, especially one used in early writing systems. It is one of the symbols belonging to a pictorial graphic system. What this means is that as the first pictograph is an ox head and corresponds to the letter Aleph, it also corresponds to our letter A. We get our alphabet directly from the Hebrew and the Greek kind of mixed together. But the letter Aleph became our letter A in English. We don't have the symbolism that they have. That's the difference. Each one of these letters, Mike, would represent so much information that it would take a Jew, once he was bar mitzvahed, once he was like 12 years old, and bar mitzvah means son of the covenant. Once he was bar mitzvahed, he would begin to study the Word of God. He would study the scrolls. And it would take him, because there's so much information involved in each letter, it would take him a year. He would spend a year on each letter before he moved on to the next letter. Now, could you see spending a year studying the letter A? You could do that in about 30 seconds. A, it's a letter. That's it. It leads to a B, but that's all it does. It's a nice grade to get if you're in school, but it really doesn't have any symbolism. Whereas the Aleph, as we've spent 10 weeks talking about the Aleph, and hopefully this might be our last week on the Aleph. We'll start with the Bet next week, maybe. Okay, we do have ample evidence that the ancient pictographic characters are the precursor to all our Hebrew alphabets. However, since words have changed meaning over time, an examination of the ancient script can reveal the true intent of any particular Hebraic word when it was originally written. And you'll see a little graph here that tells you the what those symbols were. Remember, Hebrew is from right to left. So when you look at this diagram, the Aleph is the first letter on the right top row. Okay, but it gives you the symbols, the pictograph of each of the 22 letters. Okay. This is a perfect time to remember the first word of our real history. And this is written HIS in capital letters, his story, which is rather appropriate because history is his story. But the first real word, first word in our history in the Bible, the first word in Genesis 1:1 is a Hebrew word, and it's Bereshit, or you would know it as Genesis. It means Genesis or in the beginning. But it has so much more meaning, as Michael can attest, if I give him about a week to do it, There's so much meaning involved in it. Okay. However, it means much more than beginning. It means at the start of, or at the head of all things, in the sense that it is the beginning, but also infers that the head creator planned each step, which began as a thought. The mystery of the gospel is within the first verse of Genesis. You're going to love the way I express this in the book when it comes out.
Can you one more time, the mystery of what is in the first word?
The mystery of the gospel
of the gospel.
is within the first verse of Genesis. When you look at from the Hebraic interpretation, the King James writers lost a little bit in the interpretation, but the Hebrew is so much more prolific. The ancient Hebrew language was a language based on the five senses, what they could see, feel, taste, smell, or hear. This was also due to their lifestyle, which was based in farming and allowed the seasons of planting, sowing, and harvest. They thought primarily in agricultural terms. One more, Mike. The Aleph, this chart going around, is the same thing that I've been showing you, but it's just another way of looking at it. But it shows you each of the modern Hebrew letters. It shows you the name of that letter, and it shows you the pictograph of each letter. It's just another way of getting it into your mind, just what it is that we're talking about. The Aleph is seen as a symbol of the divine, representing the ultimate source of all creation. It is believed to represent the concept of unity, as it encompasses all the other letters of the alphabet within it. In the context of the Torah, the Aleph symbolizes the beginning of creation and the start of God's revelation to humanity. It is seen as a symbol of power, of God's power and majesty, as well as his loving kindness and mercy. So the Aleph is the beginning of everything that is God. It's the start of God's revelation to us. It is the symbol of his power and his majesty, and most of all, a symbol of his loving kindness and mercy. And this is all expressed in the plan of God. Overall, the Aleph is complex and richly symbolic letter in the Jewish tradition, representing a wide range of spiritual and philosophical concepts. And that's where we're going to end on the letter Aleph. We're going to start next week on the letter Beit, which is, again, rich and full of meaning. So we'll pick that up next time. As always, any comments, questions, concerns? I know Mike his head's spinning around because he got in on the tail end of this letter, but there's a lot. I enjoyed seeing you the other night.
Yeah. Might be a little bit off subject, but the W has been so interesting to me since I found out I don't really remember when it was introduced, but
You mean the shin?
the W, so it is, I guess, English.
The English letter.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because I think it's like, where did the sound fit in somewhere else in the Hebrew alphabet? There was just no W sound.
No,
I didn't think so.
the letter Beit we're going to get to next is Beit, or is a B sound or a V sound, and that's as close as you're going to get to the W. Am I right on that?
Well, I'm trying not to be personally biased on this one. Some scholars think that the Vav sounded like a W, but there's a lot of evidence to show that the W was never in Hebrew, which makes Yahweh a problem. But yeah, I think the W was brought in later. There's actually, I think you showed this in your handouts, but there's a really interesting chart that shows from Hebrew pictographs all the way through like Greek and Latin, Roman,
Oh, yeah.
how
Yeah.
each letter has changed
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
became like, the Aleph that was the ox head, but then it flipped around and it becomes our A,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
You can actually
Yeah.
see visually how things.
Yeah, I think that was in last week's handout.
Yeah, I think so. One thing I'll add though, when you're talking about the Aleph being 1 and 1,000, that's
Mhm.
totally true. But Aleph, which starts with Aleph,
Yeah.
same letter, just said
Yeah.
differently. Aleph
Yeah.
is 1,000. That's how you say it in Hebrew. And it makes me think of one day is 1,000 years.
Yes.
And 1,000 years is as one
Yes.
day. Interesting how
And-
that all
Aleph,
works
can
out.
you spell it? Eleph? Aleph?
Same
Yeah.
spelling.
Same
Yeah, pretty much.
spelling.
Mhm.
Just an E instead of an A.
Okay. Wow.
The Aleph can have different vowel sounds.
Yeah.
Yes, you said that. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay.
And
so
I-
in a different vowel.
I'm walking a fine line there because I don't really want to teach
I know it.
Uh,
I know.
all the graphics.
Yes.
What is it? A-E-I-O-U and sometimes W? Is that what they say?
In English, yes, yes.
The other thing I'll say about Aleph is that actually, it's technically, it's just a placeholder. It's not even a letter. It doesn't
Yeah.
have a sound of its
It doesn't
own.
have a
It's
sound of
like
its
a
own.
blank with the vowel underneath it when you're reading it. So it's interesting because it's kind of a silent, powerful letter. It's there, but its presence has to be known by. It mirrors God in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and not just the ways we talked about, but grammatically even it mirrors majesty or like kingship, that kind of thing, even in grammar. It's very interesting how that all comes together and represents God.
Yeah, yeah. It is a very deep language, and as you will see, it's. We're not going to spend a year on each letter, but we just spent 10 weeks on the first one. So if you want to do the math, about 220 lessons later, we'll be done. Okay, that's all I've got to say. If anybody has any other comments.
Thank you.